Okay. Okay, so we're holding on Chavav Amud Aleph, the top Mishnah. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Nitmu Shiara, Nisrafu Shara, Abdu Shara. I didn't say, I think Hashem is able to learn Torah every day. It's possible our learning Hashem to be Samigdash immediately. So we're saying now, if Nitmu Shara, we're talking about if the remnant of the Mincha became Tameh. As you did the Kmitza, and the rest of it became Tameh. Okay, the remnant got lost. Or let's say, what's the other case? Or it got burnt. Nisra Shara. So Kamidas Rabbi Eliezer Kshera. According to the way of thinking, to the measurement of Rabbi Eliezer, we would say that it's kosher. Kamidas Rabbi Shua, according to the way of thinking of Rabbi Shua, we would say that it's pasul. Now, this is a comparison to a Mishnah in Zvachim, where over there it says, I'm sorry, it's in Psachim. Rabbi Eliezer says, Dam afal pishem basar, that you sprinkle the blood even if there's no flesh left, even if the flesh is lost. And so the same thing would be with the kaimetz. You did kamitza, that would be acceptable even if there's no shirayim left. You'd still be able to offer up the kaimetz. And according to Rabbi Shua, Rabbi Shua holds, Imein basar ein dam. If there's no flesh, then there's no dam. You can't even offer the blood if the flesh is tameh. So the same thing would apply according to Rabbi Shua by the kaimetz. We would say that if there's no shirayim that's eligible to be eaten, we would say that you can't offer the kaimetz either. Yeah. So Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, who are two students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Eliezer is Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkenes. Rabbi Yeshua is Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya. Okay, Amar Rav. Rav, this is classic. First generation Amira comes in right after a Mishnah. Amar Rav, Hushinitmu kol shara. Rav qualifies the Mishnah. He says, when do we say that there's a machlekes between Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Eliezer? That's only where Rabbi Shua says that it's pasul. That's only if everything is tamei. All the remnant is tamei. Havel mix a shara, but if there's a part of the remnant which is tamei, but a part that's not tamei, then lie. Then Rabbi Shua would agree that it's going to be. Hey, Shalom is here. Mention. Then Rabbi Shua would agree that it's going to be kosher.
Wow. Kol hakavod.
Very nice. So it comes out. You see, the statement that Rav is saying is like a little bit in between. It's ambiguous because what does Rav want to say? He wants to say that nitmu. That he wants to say that there's a difference between everything and nothing, everything and partial. Is there a difference between everything and partial? All and nothing versus partially yes. The partially yes is still kosher. Or does he want to say that there's a difference between nitmu versus the other ones? He's choosing both leniencies, partially and nitmu. He's not telling me which one is the main one. I know that nitmu could have a leniency because I know that nitmu, we learned yesterday that the tzitz is meratza. Nitmu sometimes is kosher, even though it's tamei anyway, because the front plate of the kohen gadol was an appeasement or anything that was tamei. Well, the Gemara thinks like this: Kasal kadaitach nitma'in avid v'saraflai. Gemara starts off understanding that what does Rav really mean here? That what's the hefter over here? Why Rabbi Shua would say that it's going to be good because it was only tamei, but only tamei partially. But if it would be avid v'saraf partially, if it was lost or burnt partially, then it would be totally pasul. It says, "My kasaver." Then what does he hold? Ikasaver shira milsahi. Does he hold that when there's anything left over that's considerable, we consider it valuable, and therefore the mincha is still kosher. Then even if part of it's burnt and part of it's left over, so we have stuff left over, it should be good. If you hold up what's left over is nothing, you need to have everything intact. You can't just have a little bit. You need to have the whole thing. So then, nitma my timer. Then what's the reason for nitma that it's going to be good?
Maybe that's the chiddush.
If you want to say nitma my timer the meratza tzitz, what's the reason for nitma? Because of the tzitz. Yachi kosher anami. Then why don't we say that the same thing should apply if all of the shirayim became tamei? Because we have the heter of meratza tzitz. Tzitz is an appeasement. Leilam kasav shira milsi. Really, the Gemara answers that really Rav holds that having something left over is significant and it should be kosher. Benitma v'adin lavid v'sarif. And the truth is that when it says nitma, the same thing would apply to avid v'sarif. Now, that's a little surprising because if you wanted to tell me a bigger chiddush, you would tell me avid v'sarif. If avid v'sarif, burnt and lost, is kosher, then you would have chosen to say that one over nitma. Because when you say nitma, I don't know avid v'sarif. You say avid v'sarif, I would know nitma. Why do you choose nitma and you mean avid v'sarif? The Gemara gives us the teretz that we don't usually see. It says v'hayda kama nitma reishayu nakat. Why did it say nitma? Because it was just taking the heading, the first case of the Mishnah, but it means the rest of the Mishnah as well. Yeah, that's not such a common teretz. Usually it tells me this. Avamina, mal detema, it usually tells me like a logical difference. Why do you say nitma? Because you could have thought that maybe nitma and therefore, but of course avid v'sar. It's not doing that. It's just telling me it shows nitma. There's no advantage over nitma. There's no advantage of nitma over avid v'sar. Why did Rav choose nitma? Because that was just the first case of the Mishnah, but he meant the rest of the Mishnah as well. Just took the heading.
What does that mean?
Sorry? Nitma means that it became contaminated. Talking about if someone does the kaimitz on the mincha, and the kaimitz is perfectly fine. He does the kaimitz scoop. He has to put it on the mizbeach. But the remnant of the mincha became tamei. Should you still put it on the mizbeach or not? Did you say that no, you already ruined the mincha? You can't. What are you putting it on for? There's nothing left. Right? No one's going to eat it. So that was a machlekes Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. Yeshua says, don't put it up. There's nothing to eat. You can't. It comes along Rav and says that's only if there's nothing to eat. But if there's something, even though it's partially nitma, some part begins, some not, then you would put it up. So then the Gemara concludes that Rav would say the same thing if it was partially burnt and lost. He would say the same thing. He chose nitma because that's the heading. Kid Tanya, I guess.
In the cases where they put up a tamei piece of bashar by mistake, and then it burnt, can't it's still the rest of the kapara okay with the burnt? In other words, they shouldn't have done it, but they did. Can we say that previously?
So, yeah.
So then if we said that previously, it seems to be.
This is a lechatchila. That's a bit the other, right? So you bring it. Okay. The Tanya Rabbi Yeshua kolas vachem shebetayra shenishtaimem kazayis basar kazayis chelav. Yeshua says that all sacrifices in the Torah, that something happens to the actual sacrifice, but there is remaining a kazayis of basar or a kazayis of chelav. So you can still, when you sprinkle the blood, this still is having some effect on the remnants. It says if that's the case, zerikas adam, you still sprinkle the blood. What about kechatzi zayis, basar kechatzi zayis chelav? Let's say there's only half a zayis of basar, half a zayis of chelav. The chelav is going to go on the altar. The basar is going to be eaten by the kohanim. Eina zerikas adam. That doesn't work, even if you have half and half, because achila and haktara are not mitzdaref. They don't join together to make a full kazayas. So two totally independent things. Uba ayla, what happens to a burnt offering where nothing is eaten? So then, I feel katzayis basar katzayis chelav zerikas adam. Over there, There's nothing eaten, so it's all brought on the altar. I don't care if it's partially meat, partially chaylev. It's all put on the altar, so it's all haktara.
Well, it's all eaten. It's just eaten.
It's consumed. It's consumed by the altar. Consumed. I don't know if that's eaten. So Zayrek Asadam, you still think about because it's entirely burnt. Now take a look at this. But mincha, when it comes to carbon mincha, I feel kula kayemes, even if the entire mincha is intact, lo yisrek, don't sprinkle the blood. The Gemara says mincha mayavidite. What are you talking about? There's no blood by a mincha, right? The blood of the wheat. No. So what is it? So the Gemara answers, I'm gonna papa minchas nesachim. No. Papa says we're talking about that he's bringing a sacrifice. Together with the sacrifice comes along a flour and oil and wine, and everything of the sacrifice gets lost, or tameh or something, and the only thing that's left is the flour and oil. That's the only thing that's left. So we're not going to say that by sprinkling the blood you're going to make the flour and oil eligible. Even if the entire mincha is intact, you still don't sprinkle the blood. That's what I mean. I could have thought since the flour and oil comes together with the sacrifice, it's as if it's the actual sacrifice. It comes to tell me that no, it's not the actual sacrifice.
How are these things becoming tummy? I mean, you're in the base of Mikdash. No one's supposed to be there who's tummy. And there certainly shouldn't be Shrutzim running over. So what are the makes these things tummy?
So Shrutzim move around. They get around. And then they die, and then they're coming. So that could be anywhere. Also,
even in the base of Mikdash.
Yeah. Also, a man could become tamei anywhere, right? A mazav or a balkari or something. Anything that gives off tamei. And then
retract my question.
Then it could be that the one of the shchitas of the animal was done so bad that it became an avela. It wasn't even considered a shchita.
But that's not true.
The avela becomes tamei. Yeah. Avela gives off the tamei. Oh. So there's all of these possibilities.
Still become kosher. After it rots.
Oh, after it rots, yeah, okay.
At least I remember.
Okay. Minani Mili, where it says, from where do we know that if there's only chaylev left over, you can still sprinkle the blood? We learned over here that only basar left over, you can sprinkle. Only chaylev left over, you can sprinkle. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Shmuel. Wow. Rabbi Yochanan says, name Rabbi Shmuel, Mataba Mishum Rabbi Shua ben Chananya, and some say that it reached to Rabbi Shua ben Chananya, the source of what Rabbi Yochanan says. Amar Kra, the pasuk says, V'hikter achelev l'reach nichayach la'Hashem. It says he will offer the chelev as a sweet smell, as a appeasement to Hashem. Chelev af pishem basar. Turns out that you offer the chelev even if there's no meat. Okay, that means that it's already a reach nichayach just from the chelev. So therefore, you can also sprinkle the blood if there's only chelev that's left. Ashkechan chelev. So now you tell me that chelev is enough to sprinkle the blood if there's chelev that's remaining, intact, eligible. Yiseris or stekleis minal. And what about if these organs, which is the yiseris, is the diaphragm, stekleis are the two kidneys, let's say those are remaining, but the rest of the sacrifice is lost or whatever. How do you know that you'll still sprinkle the blood just for these little organs? Diktani, because it teaches of b'mincha filakula kems la'yizrik. It says that by the mincha, even if it's fully intact, you don't sprinkle the blood of the sacrifice just because the mincha is remaining. Mincha la'yizrik. It's only because the mincha is remaining that you wouldn't sprinkle the blood. Hayiser steklayis yizrik. Mashma, that if there was it's not meat, but organs of the animal, then you would sprinkle the blood. Minalan, how do we know this? Rabbi Yochanan himself says, because the pasuk says l'reach nichayach, which means anything that you put on the fire as a smell would be counted. Now it says that we need to have both of these. Chelev and reach nichayach, because the pasuk originally said, "Hikter hachelev l'reach nichayach la'Hashem." I learned from chelev, and I also learned from reach nichayach. Chelev teaches me chelev, and reach nichayach teaches me the yeseres and the shteaklayas, the diaphragm and the two kidneys. I need both. Dikas of chelev havamina chelev and yeseres shteaklayas light. If it would only say chelev, then I would only think chelev. That's just sweet smell, the fat. But those other organs, not so edible and not so tasty. So then we would say that not. Kaser Rachmana reach nichayach, so it says reach nichayach, which means that no, it goes on the altar, it's considered reach nichayach. Because Rachmana reach nichayach, habamina fila mincha. If we would only say reach nichayach, I would think that the mincha is also counted. Kaser Rachmana chelev. Why would we think that the mincha is reach nichayach? I guess because of the kaimetz.
Frankincense.
Is the minchas nesachim a regular mincha where you take a kaimetz out and you eat the rest?
I think I asked this once. You said no. It's just like
Is it burnt?
bread.
Is it burnt on the altar? Minchas nesachim. Google minchas nesachim. Yeah, or ChatGPT. Is minchas nesachim? Is there a kaimetz taken from minchas nesachim and the rest eaten?
In the Babylonian Talmud is a ometz taken from the minchas nesachim, or
is it entirely burnt?
Is it entirely burnt?
Doesn't
The rule is that no comments is taken from minchas nesachim, rather the entire orphan is burnt on the mizbeach.
And the minchas nesachim, it's entirely burnt. So that would mean, that helps us, because that would mean that it is a reach nichayach. It's not just from the kaimet. Yeah. How does it? Oh, what's the source?
Menachos 74b-a.
74b-a.
And also 60-76.
74b.
Requiring which ones required.
Minchas kayenim, Mashiach, minchas nesachim, l'mizbeach, ve'in behem l'kayenim, in behem l'kayenim. Yeah, very good. Very good. They know a little bit.
And Rambam is also
pretty cool.
In the Rambam that minchas nesachim is a kalo l'ishim.
Kalo l'ishim. It's entirely burnt.
Yeah, but I never heard that term.
Okay, we're up to the next Mishnah. Remember the story with the dog? With the rabbi gave a speech. He said that tray for meat you throw to the dog. So there was one guy in the congregation who used to always ask the rabbi questions. He stopped coming. So after a while, the rabbi calls him in. No, he comes back and he asks the rabbi a question. He says, "Where have you been all this time?" Well, I heard your speech. He said that if it's treif, give it to the dog. So what I would do is, whenever I had a shaila, I would give it to the dog, and if it ate it, then it was treif. If not, then it was. So he said, "So why did you come back?" Yeah, this is because that dog was too machmer. Okay. Shalei b'klishar is puzzle. If it wasn't put the kaimetz after you do the kmitza, you're supposed to put it into a vessel. If you didn't put it into the vessel, and then what you do is you do the kmitza, holding it in your hand, scoop off the bottom and the top, then you put it into a vessel, and that vessel, that service vessel, klisharis, is then taken up to the altar, and then from the altar it's put on the fire. From there it's put on the fire.
The flour?
It's a flour and oil, yeah. So if he didn't put it in the klisharis the second time, we're not talking about when he did the kmitza, it wasn't in the klisharis. Of course it was. He did the kmitza in the klisharis, but now putting it in after that he's supposed to put it. He didn't do that. So the Tanakama holds pasul. Reb Shimon Machshir. Reb Shimon says no, it's kosher even if you didn't do that. Now hikter kaimtza pamayim kshera. If he offered the kaimetz twice, that means he did it in two segments. That's going to be kosher. Okay, Rav Yehuda Breder of Chia. You hear this? Rav Yehuda Breder of Chia. It's probably not Rabbi Yehuda, because usually he just goes by Yehuda. Let me see. Amr Yehuda. Yeah, the Shita Mikbetzes takes out Rabbi. Sometimes the names are like they don't fit. It's like saying Rabbi Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe gets a Rabbeinu at the end. But sometimes we don't put that on. We don't add the name Rabbi.
Excuse me. I have to get something to drink. Do you want it too?
Yeah, hot water.
Bring it for me also.
Huh? Oh,
Yeah.
just drink hot water.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, you're not on mute, by the way. That's the thing.
No.
Okay.
Aren't all Tanaim with Rabbi?
Well, anyone from Eretz Yisrael is going to be Rabbi, and anyone from Bavel is going to be Rab. He's from Eretz Yisrael, but the only thing is he was younger. I guess he's considered the son of Reb Chia. Usually doesn't have the Rabbi. Maybe he didn't have Smicha. Maybe. Okay, so my time with the Reb Shimon. Read the Beit Reb Chia says, what's the reason for Reb Shimon that holds that you don't need a Kli Sharis? Amakra. He quotes the pasuk. We've actually had this Gemara previously. It says, "Kodesh Kodashim Kachatas Akashim," referring to the mincha. It says that the mincha is holy of holies. It's like a chatas. It's like an asham. As a comparison to a chatas and an asham, which both of those are holy and holy of holies. However, the application of the blood of the chatas is different than the application of the asham. The application of the chatas is with the finger, placed on the corners directly, on all four corners. The way the asham is done doesn't say it's with the finger. It says it's with a cup, right? And it's sprinkled on the two caddy corners, two opposite corners, two which are four.
Saying how they like sprinkle it.
That's how the sprinkling was done. So now it's because we do this comparison of the mincha to the chatas and asham. So Reb Shimon would explain it like this: Bola of the biyad. If you're going to do it by hand, in other words, you don't need to put the kaimetz into a vessel. And you could just do it by hand. And if the biyamin kachatas, then you have to use your right hand, just like by a chatas. By a chatas, it says. Remember, there were two words that made it definitive that it needed to be with the right hand. Etzba and kahuna. It said etzba and kahuna, it needed to be with the right hand. And that's what it says by a chatas. It says etzba and it says kain. What's the pasuk? It says the Nasan Nakayan Betzbai or something. Okay, so if that's the case, so if he's doing it by hand, then he has to use his right hand. Bekeli, but if he's doing it with the vessel, if the besmal kasham, then he can do it with the left hand, just like by the asham. Now the asham, actually, you don't do it with the left hand, but by the asham, it doesn't say etzba. And according to Reb Shimon, say. Reb Shimon holds that Zrika is Kesher B'Smal.
To bring you a cookie.
Check. There's a There's the Zoom. Zoom was Dr. Stein, but he's not on anymore. He went to well, he didn't want to miss a second. Anyway, I'm not going to be here tomorrow, and Dr. Stein is going to take over. Okay. So we say like this. The Reb Shimon holds that the Zrika by an Asham, if the Zrika is done by the left hand, it's going to be kosher. So Reb Shimon holds that if you're using a utensil, which is the way the Asham blood is applied to the altar, it's allowed to be with the left hand. So if you're using a utensil for the kaimetz, it's also allowed to be done to be taken with the left hand. In other words, you have an option of vessel or no vessel, according to Reb Shimon. That's what we're getting from this. Which the Tanakama say pasul, Reb Shimon says is kosher. And he learned it because it's the comparison to the asham or to the... Okay. That's the Rabbi Yehuda Breder of Chia. Rabbi Yanai Yamar, Rabbi Yanai says, Rabbi Yanai is a teacher of Rabbi Yechanan, right? Rabbi Yanai says, Kiven shekamtzu meklisharis, once the kmitza was done out of a klisharis, so then maleo maktira afila beimenai. Hemyenai is a gartel. It says once you already did the kmitza, doesn't matter how you bring it up. You can even use your gartel. Oh, there's a gartel sitting over there. You can even use your gartel to wrap up the kaimetz. And they had wider gartels, not like the little string mincha gartel. Afilu b'makida shel cheres, even if you use a like a makida, sounds like a flower pot, just an earthenware vessel. What do they translate it there? Okay.
But we're talking about carrying, in other words, you can carry like in the belt.
Yeah, that's right. So he learned
the original fanny pack.
In his fanny pack. Very good. So we have Rabbi Yehuda Breder of Chia that says a comparison. We have Rabbi Yanai that says once the kmitza was done, then it doesn't matter what you bring it up. And Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar Kol Moedim B'Kayim Shetan Kiddush. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says no. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says even according to Reb Shimon, it has to be put into a vessel. Question is, after the vessel, you take it out, and you don't need to. You could bring it to the altar out of the vessel, but it needs to be put into a vessel first. Nachman bar Yitzchak is a standalone opinion in this. The other ones don't say that. Meisvei, the Gemara has a question. Hector chalavim veivarim veitzim shalom bein biad bein bekeli bein bimin bein besmol ksherim. Says that the offering up of the fats, the limbs, the wood that was taken, whether by hand or whether in a vessel, bein bimin, bein besmol, whether it's in the right hand or whether it's the left hand, ksherin. By all of those items, it doesn't matter how it was put on the altar, right hand or left hand. HaKaimetz, this is what we're looking for. V'aktayres v'alavayna shehelan. Take a look at this. The kaimetz, the ktayres, and the lavayna that's brought on the altar. Bein biyad, bein bekeli, whether by hand or whether with a vessel. Bein biyamin, bein besmall is ksherin. Whether it's in the right hand or whether it's in the left hand, it's kosher. Now, there's a problem here with the way Rabbi Yehuda Breder of Chia taught us, because he made a distinction between if you're doing it with your hand, it needs to be with the right hand. Doing it with the vessel, it could be with the left hand. Here we say whether it's by hand, whether with the vessel, whether it's with the right, whether it's at the left. That means the right hand, by hand, could still be with the left. Because he said whether by hand, whether by this, right?
By land or by sea.
Where's that from? Is that from the poem on the?
I don't
Oh.
know. It's not Emma Lazarus.
Okay. It says the Gemara says Tiyufta de Rabbi Yehuda Breder of Chia. Should we say that this is a question? Rabbi Yehuda Breder of Chia. Usually, when it does this, it would conclude with Tiyufta de Rabbi Yehuda Breder of Chia, and we'll say Tiyufta. Is this a question? Yes, it's a question. The Gemara doesn't conclude like that. It says, "Is this a question?" When he answers, "Amalach Rabbi Yehuda Breder of Chia," Rabbi Yehuda Breder of Chia could respond. It says, "Let's start in Ketani." You have to read it as two independent clauses. Could be bein biyamin bekeli, biyad is biyamin, bekeli it's biyamin, bein biyamin bein bismol.
You meet the weather reports on the ocean. And it's not always so.
So the way we would read it like this: it says whether by hand, whether by vessel, whether in the right, whether with the right hand, whether with the left. What that would mean is that whether you do it by hand, then you would need to do it with the right hand. But if you do it with the vessel, then you could do it with the left hand also. So l'stadin ktani means that all of those clauses don't go together. I don't know the grammar term for this, but when you have options, in the second clause, whether this or whether that. Is that going on both of the previous ones or only on one of the previous ones? It says could be by hand or by vessel, whether it's the right or the left. Now, the right or the left, is that going on this or is it going on both of them? This, I'm sure there's a difference with the way you use commas and parentheses and stuff. But, anyway, what we're saying now is that if it's done by hand, then it needs to be done with the right hand. Okay, we gave a teretz to the Yehuda breeder of Chia. Yehuda breeder of Chia. Tashma, come and listen. Come to Shalei Mikli Sharis. That's over here. You take out the word Shalai. That's a bad one. Come to Mikli Sharis. He did Kmitza from the Kli Sharis. The kid Shay Shalei Mikli Sharis. And you put it into a vessel, that's what it means. And then you brought it on the altar without the vessel. That's puzzle. Reb Shimon say that it's kosher b'matan keli with use of vessel. It doesn't have to be a kli sharis. Problem is that Reb Nachman said everyone agrees that you need to put it into a vessel. And here we're saying that according to Reb Elazar and Reb Shimon, you don't need a vessel. The Gemara says, "Ema mi matan keli velech," not b'matan keli, but they permit it once it's already in a vessel. Then they allow you to offer it up without the vessel. Yeah, he's reteaching the brisa. Okay, which means that you do the kmitza, you put it into a vessel, you take it out of the vessel, you do halacha and aktara, and all of that is acceptable because it was once in a vessel. That's Reb Nachman bar Yitzchak's explanation of Reb Shimon. Tashma, b'chacham ha'maimrim kaimetz ton kli sharis. Chacham say that the kaimetz needs to be put into a vessel. Kate said, how do you do this? Kaimtze mikli sharis, mekatshe b'kli sharis. Do the kmitza from a service vessel, and then you put it into a service vessel. Mala maktir b'kli sharis, and then you offer it up in the service vessel. Reb Shimon Aimer kiven shekamtze mikli sharis. Mala maktir shlei b'kli sharis v'dayai. Once you took it out of a vessel, you don't have to put it back into a vessel. It's enough that you took it out. Kasha Reb Nachman bar Yitzchak says that even Reb Shimon holds it has to be put into a vessel. Yeah, but it says Ema kiven shekamtze v'kidsha b'kli sharis. We throw in one more word. Once it was taken out of the vessel and then it was put back in the vessel, mala maktir v'dai, then it's enough. You can offer it up, and that's enough. Even if you're not offering it up with a vessel, but once it was placed into the vessel, that's good enough. You did the kmitza with the right hand, and you put it in your left hand. So it says, don't worry, you can put it back into your right hand. Bismillah, you did the kmitza with the left hand. I'm sorry. Bismillah. While it was in the left hand, very interesting. Because it was in the left hand at that time, it wasn't considered a service when it was in the left hand. So if he had thoughts of pigel during that time, it would invalidate it, but it won't turn it into pigel. It would be puzzle, but it's not karis. It doesn't become karis while it's in the left hand. You take out the words lish nachrina and you add in the word biyaminai. If it's in the right hand, that's not sure who that is. He adds in the word. Shitz adds in it. So biyamina with the right hand, but from the right hand, then yes, if you do have thoughts of pigel, it will be karis if someone eats it. Reb Elazar Reb Shimon. That's the words of Reb Elazar Reb Shimon. Some say that once you put it into the left hand, then the whole thing is pasul. You can't even put it back. My time, what's the reason? Yishum the by kedusha bekeli, because you have to still put it into a vessel. And given shenasna l'smal nasi gadam shenishbach mitzav behem al ritz v'asvishapasal. This is comparable, according to the Chachamim, to the blood that's spilt on the floor, and then you try to pick it up. It's spilt from the neck of the animal on the floor. If it's spilt from the vessel on the floor, it's different. But if it's spilt from the neck of the animal on the floor, you try to pick it up, it doesn't work. Michlal, but this implies there are Rab Shem Leibain Matan Keli. Because why did we say it was possible? Because you needed to put it into a vessel. And here, Rab Shimon is saying you don't need to put it into a vessel. The left hand would be satisfactory. You could put it back in the right hand. Do you have to do Rav Nachman? Do you have to? This is a very strong question on Rav Nachman, which means Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. He said that Rab Shimon would agree that it needs to be put into a vessel. The Rabbi Yehuda Breder Rab Chia Messiah. This is a support for Rabbi Yehuda Breder Rab Chia, because he said a difference between if you're doing it by hand, then you need to do it with the right hand. That's what it says. It has to go back into the right hand. What about Rabbi Yanai Leima Tevitiyufta? Rabbi Yanai, we could say that it's a question. It says you're allowed to bring it in your belt. So if you could bring it in the belt, you could bring it in your left hand. Why do we say you put it back to the right hand? So Amalach Rabbi Yanai would respond to this. Another Amri Kitana de Hector, a loveless southern Ktani. I'm going to go back to that brisa where it says that it says a kaimitz v'alavayna she'elam bein biyad bein bekeli bein biyamin bein mismal. It's going to be kosher. So he says that it's saka kosher with the left hand. You're allowed to do it with the left hand. He has a source. We also had that question. We also had that, but we explain when it says with the left hand that that's only if you're using a vessel, but not if you're doing it by hand. It comes on Rabbi Yanai and says, no, I'm not learning it like that. I'm learning even if you're doing it by hand, that it's still kosher with the left hand. Okay. Let me use this. Hector kaimta mayim kshera. If the kaimitz of the mincha was divided into two, they offered half the kaimitz, then they offered the other half. Rabbi Shua ben Levi says that pamayim is good, but pamayim, but you can't divide it into 3 or 4. Yechanan Amar, he argues with Rabbi Shua ben Levi. He says pamayim, afilu pamayim. You could have it into 3 or 4. You divide it up into little portions. My binayu, what's the reason? Not what's the difference, because we know the difference, but what's the reason for the difference? Amar Rab Zeira, yesh kaimetz pachas mishnei zeisim, yesh aktara pchusim mikazayis ekaminayu. Difference is there a possibility of having a kaimetz that's less than 2 zeisim, and can you have an aktara that's less than a kazayis? That's the difference. Rabbi Shua ben Levi Savrein kaimetz pachas mishnei zeisim, that you'll never have kaimitz that's less than 2 zeisim. So therefore, when it says that you can divide it into 2, that's because each one is going to be a kazayas. But bein aktar pchusim kazayas. But you can't have aktar less than a kazayas. So you can only have the limit you can have here is 2 offering ups.
So Lamar said, what's he doing? He takes the kaimitz, he puts it in the bowl, and then in the bowl, or he puts it in 2 bowls, half in one, half in the other. And then they toss one in, like feeding ducks, and now they have the other, and then they toss that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's acceptable as a akdara because each one was a kazayas. Rabbi Yechanan said, "Yesh kaimitz pachas mishnei zeisim." It's possible that there's a kaimitz that's even less than 2 zeisim. So the fact that you're allowed to offer it up. Are you allowed to offer it to if it's less than a kazayas? Because it's less than 2 zeisim, so now each one is less than a kazayas. Because yesh aktara pchusim kazayas, because he holds that it's considered aktara less than a kazayas. When do you need a kazayas? That's for the for eating something. But on the altar, it's considered a aktara less than a kazayas. Okay, Itmar. Statement of Amirayim, which is usually a machlaikas. Statement goes like this: Kaimetz meimasai mater shirayim ba'achila. At what point does the kaimetz allow for the shirayim to be eaten? It says what's remnant of the mincha is for Aaron and his sons. So at what point? Rabbi Chanina, who's a very early Meira in Eretz Yisrael, his name is Rabbi Chanina Bar Chama. He was a teacher of Rabbi Yochanan. He says, "Mishem mashla by esa'ar." Once the fire catches on, it's already you can eat the shirai. Excuse me. That's Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Mishatatzitz by esa'ar berubai, when it's caught on to the majority. Amar le Rabbi Yehuda le Rabba bar Rabbi Yitzchak. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda says to Rabba bar Rabbi Yitzchak, Asber lach taima to Rabbi Yochanan. I'll give you the explanation for Rabbi Yochanan. He says like this: Amar kra v'hinei Allah kitar haaretz kekitar akivshan. This is by Sedaim. He says the smoke that was coming up like the smoke of a furnace after Sedaim was turned over, right? What type of furnace? The furnace that's used for smelting. He explains, he says, uses the word kitar, means to smoke. Similar to the word that we use for offering something on the altar, we call it haktara. It means to smoke, to make it go into smoke. In ein kipshan malakita achatatzas barubai. When does the furnace give off smoke? When the fire is caught on to the majority of it. So when is it considered aktara? Only when it's majority caught on. Amalei Ravin Baravada l'Rava. Ravin Baravada says to Rava, Amri Talmidcha, Amar Rav Amram, Tanya. Your students say, he's complaining to Rava, your students say that Rav Amram taught a brisa. He's asking a question on I'm not sure. Let's see.
Wait, so we have a question. Because first we said all you needed was like
To catch on. That's a machlaikas. It's not a question. Rabbi Chanina says when it starts, and Rabbi Yochanan says when it's entirely, when it's when the majority.
In the kosher restaurant where they go in just to light the pilot light.
Yeah.
Why isn't that like similar that to the first few? And if we accept that, shouldn't that be good enough? All you need is to start the other.
Maybe.
No, maybe you got that for the first view. That's what I'm right.
Yeah. That's a gzeira. This is something else. Okay.
No, I don't know that.
Pasuk says that it's a fire on the mizbeach all night until morning, and the fire of the mizbeach burns on it. Ainly eladvar pshadakli karav balayla. But he said that it's the oila which is on the fire all night. That's only the oila which this is only things that go on the fire all night. Kagain evarim upedarim. The fats and the limbs of the sacrifices, limbs of the oila and the fats of other sacrifices, of all the sacrifices that go on onto the fire. That you're allowed to even put them on the fire after the sun sets, and they stay on the fire the whole night. But things that are only brought on the altar by day, for example, the scoop and the frankincense, akteres, minchas kainim, Mashiach. Use the ketairos for the wrong. Ketairos doesn't go on this mizbeach. Minchas nesachim, which shemal and maktirim mibaya shemesh. How do you know that you're allowed to put them on the fire even after the sun sets?
Isn't that when the Tzvul Yom brings his korban? Hey?
No, the Tzvul Yom is allowed to eat. He's allowed to eat his truma after the day.
Doesn't he have to bring?
Then he has to bring a korban, but he brings it the following. If it depends what type of Tzvul Yom is, but then he brings it the following day during the day, not at night. Yeah. So the Gemara interrupts what we just said. It says, "Va'amr shedarkan likarev bayom." You told me that they're brought by day. Now you're telling me that you're allowed to bring them by night. Ella im boya shemesh shemisachim halchim kol halayla. Rather, what it means is that if you started to burn it while it was still day, then it can continue all night. And minayin, where do we know this from? Talmud Laimar zeis teres oila riba. It says this is the laws of the oila. It's going to include that it can start by day and continue by night. Now, if you put it on exactly when it's right as the sun is setting. So how did it catch on? Majority. It takes a few minutes to catch on. And you're telling me you're allowed to put it on in Baya Shemesh together with the sun setting. It says like kasha. So it's a kasha on Rabbi Yochanan, right? It's kasha on Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says it has to be majority Koran. It says like kasha. Khan, when did we say that it's enough that once the fire goes on it, that's liklate? That's not that it's considered satisfactory. That's only that the Mizbeach has accepted it. And that now once it's on, you can let it continue. Khan lahatir. But what Rabbi Yochanan was saying, when you're when you're allowed to eat the mincha, it has to burn more than just that. This is just to get your foot in the door. So once you're in the door, then you have to wait for it to. Rabbi Lezer Masnila. Rabbi Lezer learns this mibay hashemesh, which is after the sunset. Mukan labapaikim. We're talking about when it was already on the altar, but it just popped off because of the way the fire was burning. And then you're allowed to put it back on. They also learned it. Rav Dimi came, he said the name of Rav Yana from Eretz Yisrael, that they was talking about when it popped off the fire. Does Rav Yana say that that's what we're talking about? That we're talking about that it popped off the fire and then you're allowed to put it back on because it was on already once. One of the things that we said was Ketairis. It says if the Ketairis jumps off the fire, even if it's like larger pieces, you don't put it back on. Tani Rab Chanina bar Minyumi b'debei Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov. The sages taught from the house of Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov. Asher teichal ha'esh asa oila ala mizbeach, that the fire burns the oila. You can put it back on the fire on the mizbeach. Ikule oila atamachzer. What was consumed but from an oila, you're allowed to put back on. Yet the machzer kolekteris, but you're not allowed to put back on the ketteris. Now, how could you say that our brisa is talking about where it jumped off? Because one of the items in the brisa was ketteris, and we learned that ketteris doesn't go back on. It says sami mikan ketteris, erase from the brisa ketteris. Erase the ketteris, and everything fits. Rabasi ki pashit Rabbi Lozer ben Menachos Daf. Pashit means when he was involved with. When Rabasi says that when Rabbi Lozer was learning Menachos, he asked the following question. By Rabbi Lozer asks, Kaimitz shesidre v'sider alav esamaracha mahu. The kaimitz was arranged on the altar, and then the wood was placed on the altar, and it was burnt like that. Question is, derech haktar b'kach shein derech haktar b'kach. Is this the way of burning it or not? Similar question. It means the mincha was put down first and the wood was put on top. That's what it sounds like. Mahu. If the limbs were put on the altar and then the wood was placed on top and it was burnt like that, what's the din? Allah Eitzim Amrachman has to go on the wood. Dafka Allah Eitzim. You could do it either way. Oh, take it. I'm sorry, take it. Very important. Yeah, we leave that as a question. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha has a question if the ivarim of an oila were put on the side of the fire, and then you lit the fire. According to Pin, that al means on top. That's not our question. The al eitzim, it has to go on top. We're asking a question according to Pin that says al doesn't mean on top. It means besamach. It means next to. We had it recently in Rashi. So what would be the din? Hachanami al besamach. Dilma al. Maybe over here the word ala itzim is similar to ala mizbeach. Ma hasam al mamish, just like on the mizbeach it needs to be on. Afachanami al mamish. Maybe over here when it says on the wood, it needs to be on top of the wood, not on the side of the wood. So the Gemara leaves it with the teku. Okay, so tomorrow, Bez Hashem, Dr. Stein, you'll do this Chav Zayin 27 at the Mishnah. 27a.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you,
Sam.
everyone. Have a great day. Bye, Shalom.
I know.
Bye.
Okay.